Hi, I'm Kevin from Bickert Management, and I'm going to thrill and delight you by talking about field types today. Uh, so, I'm actually going to talk about one particular field type, but within relational databases, within Zoho CRM, and any other database system you've ever heard of, there's what's called fields, and a field is just a place you put data. And you can have fields like single line and multi-line. Those are just, you can plug anything in there. So you can put in a name, a phone number, a mixture of numbers and letters, whatever you want. Most other fields are a little bit restrictive about what they allow you to put in. So an email will only accept an email address. A phone number will only accept a phone number. Date will only accept a date time, similar. There's a variety of different kinds of number fields, 6 there, URL, lookup, which is a great one. You can connect to a different module within your database, so that's very, very powerful. User, so you can choose particular users. That's also fairly powerful for permissions and reporting. Formula can be very powerful. You can combine other data in different ways. File upload, so you can drop a file into your record so that you can have a reference to that. Same thing with image, and roll-up summary, so that you can get data. So when you have a lookup connection with another record, you can roll that data up. Multi-select lookup, which is sort of a complicated version of a lookup. But the main field that I want to talk about right now is the pick list. So what is a pick list? So a pick list is basically a list of different options that you predefine. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to see my lead source. So this is a common use for a pick list field. So you're defining something about your record from a variety of options. So you can say, okay, where did my lead come from? And I have whatever different options there. And then I can drive reporting. So that's a great one for looking at your marketing spend. So you can say, okay, we got 30 new leads from that trade show we went to last month. Was that worth the cost of admission? Or I got 50 new leads from my online store. Is that worth the cost of having that website and all of that maintenance? So that's a powerful one for looking at your marketing. A lot of pick lists are very good around reporting. So industry, you can see, okay, what industry are my leads coming from? Lead status, we're going to get into that in a little bit. That's sort of what stage are they at. Rating, you can rate your leads. So again, very powerful reporting. Another really powerful, really common use of the pick list field is to determine where we are. So a pain point is a little bit, so you can have sort of going through a sales process or a customer service process, you can define, okay, what's the reason this customer is unhappy or has come to me, and then you can drive, what process do I follow? You can use other pick lists the same way. So industry, you might have a different sales process for different industries, right? Or you might have an entirely different process altogether for different industries. So, somebody in one industry might be, likely to be a sales contact, whereas a person in another industry could be more likely to be a vendor or a referral, or somebody you just talk to about, business. That's not a great example, but you can have, lead type. We don't have a lead type field, but you could create a lead type field, and that would tell you, okay, what is my process for this lead? So is this lead, a hot sales lead? Is this a person who's more likely to be a reference I can use? Is this person a referral from somebody else? So I have to thank the existing person for that. So so pick lists don't just drive reporting, they also drive process. You can determine with a pick list which process you want to follow. What am I doing with this lead? What does it mean? A different type of lead can mean a different thing. Now, the last example of, I haven't gone over every possible way you can use a pick list, but the main example that I want to talk about is the status field. So the reason lead status, or any kind of status, stage, can't think of another synonym, but basically, where that thing is within your process, that drives your process. So what do I mean by that? If you get into your lead status, you can say, okay, and you don't have to have a process mapped out. You can use this as your starting point to map out your process, or if you already have a process mapped out, you can just map that against a pick list like this. And so you say, okay, what are the different stages that my lead will go through? And you name them, you put them in here, and then that becomes the driver of your process. That becomes the conveyor belt. So when a lead is in I've jumped to contacts now, but so when your record is in a certain stage, okay, it's a new contact, maybe they just converted from a lead, and who's responsible for that? So you can say, okay, the sales team, maybe the contact owner is responsible for that. So new leads that I own appear on a report for me. So I have my homepage reports, and all of the contacts that are in a certain stage that are belonging to me, they appear there. And I have a certain responsibility towards those contacts at that stage. What's my responsibility? Well, maybe I have to call them within 24 hours. Maybe I have to prepare a proposal for them. Maybe I have to, do some other task for them. This doesn't necessarily, sales is what I talk about because we're in the CRM and it's built around that, but a pick list can drive any kind of process. So it can be any kind of fulfillment process, customer service process, you name it, approval processes, documentation processes. You can, once you've gone in there and defined your stages and said who is responsible at each stage, what are they responsible for doing, now you have a process. Now you can generate reports. So one of the very common use cases for a process like this, or a pick list that drives a process, is reporting. And one of the a lot of people really like the Kanban report. So Kanban reports, every Kanban report you've ever seen is driven by a pick list field. Whether or not that's acknowledged, that's where it starts. If you want a Kanban report, the first thing you need is a pick list. And the Kanban reports are great. You can use them to see sort of a global overview of where all your processes are, and they visually represent things. So you can see here, oh wow, I have a lot of deals stuck in value proposition. Well, maybe I should look into that. Maybe, as a manager, that's your bread and butter. There's something you need to work on. I need to figure out why so many deals are stuck in that stage and how to get them unstuck. And, by having a formalized process and stages within it, that surfaces that data. And another thing is, if you've done the work of defining who's responsible and what they're responsible for at each stage, you know who you have to talk to. You have to talk to the sales guy and you say, oh, why are these all stuck in value prop? And, they're going to have an answer, and then you can do management work and try to solve that. So the reporting surfaces the data that you need to do your job. And this doesn't need to start from a point. Like I said, you can generate a pick list, in a minute, based on sort of what you suspect to be the process that you want to follow. And you run people through the process, and then, okay, well, you have 30 people stuck in meeting booked. Why does that what does that mean? Oh, it's because they don't know what to do after they have the meeting, but they didn't get the deal signed or something. So maybe you want to add another step in your process there. The pick list doesn't need to be an ironclad, it doesn't need to be a straitjacket. You can always go back in and change your pick list options, but that's not the same thing as having a wide open, a single line entry field. Your average user can't create new stages in your pick list, or you probably wouldn't want to allow that. But you, as the manager, as the overall administrator, can definitely go in and add and remove stages so that you can, modify your process so that it matches your current business. But so and then again, when you do that, you're sort of compelled. You can opt out, but you have the opportunity to define those steps, to say, okay, I've added this new step. The reason I've added this new step is because I want people to be doing this new thing, and so the simple little field becomes a sort of an anchor around which you can sort of manage your thought about your process. And it's not gonna save you if you have no idea how to do a process, but it's a great place to start. And it at the very least, it's gonna tell you sort of where your problems are, because people are gonna enter the data, and you're gonna see where people get stuck. In a more advanced sense, there's a couple ways you can use these pick lists. So one way is with stage history. So let's say I jump through all these stages, and then I lost the deal. Hey, here's another pick list. Reason for loss. So that's another thing you can do for it. Is when I move a record into a certain status on that pick list, it drives this layout rule that says, okay, when I mark my deal as closed lost, I have to say the reason for loss. So now I'm compelled to put in the data that now is reporting data. So you can see, okay, why are we losing our deals? And again, because that closed lost field is a pick list, you can't just write in whatever you want. You have to choose from the list of options so that you get decent reporting. You might want to have a secondary field there that's a long, a long text field so that people can write in all of their reasons. Well, this customer, they didn't like the smell of the showroom, so they didn't want to come back, or something like that. That's a terrible example, but pick list is not going to be able to capture sort of that long tail of data that you need. So you might want to pair it with a long answer, but you want to start with a pick list so at least you have something to go on. And I was just going into the stage history, so you can see every time you change a status within the pick list, it gives you data. And you can use that data in reporting. So you can say, okay, again, like the Kanban, I have data that's telling me that people are always getting stuck in that value prop because they spend a day in value proposition, they spend a day in identify decision makers and 2 days in proposal price quote, but they're spending 2 weeks in value proposition. Why is that? Well, here now I have some data that they can do management on. There's a couple more uses. With pick lists, you can also do, you can tie pick lists to other pick lists. So what do I mean by that? So I could have within each stage, I could have a whole process. So for qualification, I have 3 steps. For needs analysis, I have 2 steps. For value proposition, I have 4 steps. And rather than creating a extra long pick list that has all of those substages in it. This is already more than I usually like to see in a Kanban view, but if you can squeeze it into 5 stages, then it makes a perfect Kanban view, but that's not always possible. But what you can do is you can have substages. So you can have, new customer 1, sales process 2, deal written 3, closed 1, 4, and closed lost 5. And then you can have a whole series of substages within the stage, and you can use special layout rules, so they're called field dependency rules or something like that, that allow you to say, okay, within the needs analysis stage there are 3 substages. So you have you have a single substage field, but that substage field is dynamic based on the stage. So when I move into needs analysis, it says step 1 of needs analysis, and then you can choose between step 1, 2, and 3 of needs analysis, and each of them, again, as with any other pick list, you can have implications of that. Who's responsible? What report does it go on? Do we have a goal or a timeline? Do we have an expectation? And so you don't need, you can have your cake and eat it too with the Kanban. You can have the global 5-stage view that shows you sort of what's going on sort of globally, and then within each of those stages you can have the substages, and you can see, okay, for that drill down, for that process complexity that you often have, right? You might have 12 different steps within your sales process, but maybe you have a CEO level Kanban view that just says, these are all in the sales process. And then if the CEO wants to drill down, they can talk to the sales managers and they can look at maybe a more specific Kanban, or maybe they can look at different reporting that shows them where the salespeople are with their records. So you can have sort of the high level view and the individual sort of complexity both managed by those picklist fields. Last thing, blueprints. So blueprints, very powerful, maybe not the most powerful, but among the sort of top tier power in terms of things you can do with picklists around processes, because what you can do here is you can say, okay, when I'm in a certain stage, I can only move to one other stage. I can't just grab it and move over here. I have to, I have a button that says proposal. I can click that button. When I click that button, there's criteria I have to fulfill. There's events that occur besides just changing that picklist value. When I click that button, there are things that happen after that, email notification, I get a task assigned to me, or any kind of automation. So you can drive a lot of different processes with a simple, click of a button to move a thing from one stage to another. And you can have, connections from different levels, and you could have different buttons that allow them to set, okay, I can jump straight from qualification to contract stent, but I need certain things in place for that button to even appear. So that's how you can, generate these very complicated, sort of highly refined, highly bespoke processes from your simple pick list. And you don't even need a ton of options. This is 6 options here, and you can have all kinds of different ways they can go. But imagine if you had 20 different options, you could have, these can get very complicated, and there's an upper limit to how complicated you want to get and still have utility, but you can get pretty high up there. So, and it's all driven by a pick list. So just to wrap up, you don't need to jump straight into blueprints. You don't need to jump straight into doing Kanban views and substages. You can start with a really simple pick list that's just, okay, new lead, in sales, closed, delivered, whatever stages you want. And if it's a new process, or you're a new business and you're just defining your process, you can use the pick list as a kind of anchoring point for your thought around what is my process. What do I need to happen for my business to function? What are the steps? And then once you have those steps, you can define them. You can say, okay, who's responsible? What needs to happen in this? What are my expectations? What kind of reporting do I want on it? All of that stuff follows from this, and because you've done it inside the system, because you've built a tool around it, you can just immediately have sort of a lot of different things at your disposal in order to get that process going. So you can have the dashboard view that shows you all new leads, and you can have them flashing red in front of your managers when you have new leads that have been new leads for 24 hours. And it goes to the CEO when you have a new lead that hasn't been touched for a week, that kind of thing. That's one management philosophy, but you can use them in a lot of different ways, and the pick list just sort of acts as a seed for that, and then also facilitates sort of every step down the way of getting your process nailed down, reporting against it, assigning responsibilities, creating other tools. So when I go into when I say contact in future, then it creates a task for me in 2 weeks to do that contact. So you can leverage other tools within the system. Again, because the pick list is limited, because I only have a set of options, you can have it driving things like that because you've defined what things mean. Hope this was helpful. Hope this wasn't too much of just talking about fields. But if you have any questions, or you want to point out why another field is better than pick lists, or anything, any response to this, I'd love to hear from you. I'm Kevin from Bickert Management. Have a great day.